In recent years, I've found myself scrolling through Twitter more often than before. Since Elon Musk acquired the platform, it has become noticeably more engaging. The once dominant echo chamber of certain progressive narratives and mutual reinforcement has diminished, not vanished entirely, but certainly less overwhelming. This shift has opened up space for a wider array of discussions, including some that spark genuine curiosity and debate. One recurring theme I've encountered is admiration for China's socialist system. Posts often highlight the country's impressive achievements: towering skyscrapers, high-speed trains, monorails, and sleek urban infrastructure. In contrast, critics point to the United States as a land of outdated systems, suggesting that capitalism has faltered and that socialism might be the way forward. While some of this sentiment may stem from paid Chinese propagandists, much of it comes from everyday Americans who may not fully grasp the underlying dynamics at play. To understand this better, it's helpful to explore two key concepts that are not always widely discussed: legacy burden and path dependency. These ideas explain why established nations like the US face unique challenges in modernizing, while newer or rebuilding economies can leap ahead. Legacy burden refers to the ongoing costs and complications of maintaining an old, established system or infrastructure. When a country or industry builds something groundbreaking in its time, it doesn't just create assets, it also accumulates a burden over the decades. This includes escalating maintenance expenses, as materials age and require repairs or upgrades. It also encompasses the human element, generations of experts trained specifically for that system, who may resist or struggle with change. Moreover, legacy systems often intertwine with laws, regulations, and cultural norms that evolve around them, making any overhaul feel like unraveling a tightly knotted web. For example, consider the U.S. electrical grid. Much of it dates back to the early 20th century, designed for a time when energy demands were far lower. Today, maintaining this aging network costs billions annually in repairs, outages, and inefficiencies. Upgrading to smart grids or renewable integrations isn't just about installing new tech, it's about retrofitting thousands of miles of lines, retraining utility workers, and navigating a patchwork of state regulations. The burden grows heavier with time, as deferred maintenance leads to vulnerabilities like blackouts during extreme weather. In contrast, a developing nation might build a grid from scratch using the latest solar or microgrid technologies, avoiding these inherited costs altogether. Closely related is path dependency, which describes how early choices lock a system into a particular trajectory, making deviations increasingly difficult and costly. Once a path is chosen, whether in technology, policy, or infrastructure, subsequent decisions build upon it, creating dependencies that favor continuity over innovation. Switching paths requires not only creating something new but also dismantling or adapting everything connected to the old way, often at exponential expense. A classic illustration comes from the world of keyboards. The QWERTY layout, designed in the 1870s to prevent typewriter jams, persists today despite more efficient alternatives like Dvorak. Why? Billions of people are trained on QWERTY, software and hardware are optimized for it, and the cost of retraining and redesigning would be immense. In economics, this explains why some industries stick with outdated practices. The sunk costs of prior investments create inertia. Applying this to real-world development, look at banking systems. In the early 2000s, many in Russian-speaking countries poked fun at how outdated American and European banking seemed: clunky checks, slow wire transfers, and limited online access. This wasn't due to incompetence. Western banking had evolved over a century, with specialists, regulations, and customer habits deeply entrenched in paper-based processes. Overhauling it risked disrupting millions of accounts and transactions. Meanwhile, post-Soviet nations had minimal banking infrastructure after the USSR's collapse. They could adopt cutting-edge digital technologies from the start, like mobile apps and instant transfers, without compatibility issues. As a result, their digital banking leaped ahead, offering features that took the West years to catch up on. The same pattern held for mobile networks and internet access in those regions. Without legacy phone lines or dial-up systems to accommodate, they rolled out advanced 4G and fiber optics more seamlessly, often surpassing Western standards in speed and coverage. This framework sheds light on China's modern marvels. Much of the country's infrastructure was built from a relatively clean slate in recent decades, during its economic boom. Without the weight of century-old systems, China could incorporate the latest innovations: AI-integrated smart cities, bullet trains exceeding 200 miles per hour, and energy-efficient high-rises. Videos from places like Shanghai showcase this: gleaming metro stations with facial recognition and seamless connectivity. In the United States, however, the story is different. U.S. railroads, highways, and urban grids were largely established in the mid-20th century, during the post-World War II era. Upgrading them involves not just funding new projects but contending with path dependency, rerouting around existing developments, complying with environmental reviews, and coordinating across federal, state, and local governments. Add to that a strong respect for private property rights, essential to our democratic values, which can make even simple tasks like tunneling under land prohibitively complex without landowner consents. The result? Projects like California's high-speed rail drag on for years, ballooning in cost due to these inherited constraints. Yet, this isn't a permanent defeat. China will likely face its own legacy burden in 50 to 70 years, as today's cutting-edge systems age and require upkeep. By then, perhaps another nation, maybe one currently in turmoil, like Somalia, could rebuild from scratch and boast superior innovations, labeling established powers as outdated dinosaurs. Of course, that's assuming global progress continues uninterrupted. It's also worth noting that China's showcased splendor is concentrated in a handful of megacities: Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong. The latter cannot even be fully attributed to China's success, since much of its development occurred in the 1980s and 1990s under British rule. These hubs, home to roughly 80 to 100 million people, enjoy relatively high living standards, with average incomes around $15,000 per year, modest by U.S. standards but solid when adjusted for purchasing power parity. It is from these cities that the viral videos of futuristic skylines and efficient transit systems emerge. However, China is vast, with a population exceeding 1.4 billion. Official figures place the national average income at about $7,000 per year. This disparity means that while urban elites thrive, hundreds of millions in rural and provincial areas earn far less, often $5,000 or below, while grappling with poverty, limited access to services, and outdated infrastructure. Many of these people are willing to work 996 schedules for very low pay on massive infrastructure projects. It's as if the United States had an additional 300 million people willing to do hard physical labor for $500 a month without complaint. In essence, a prosperous minority in China, comparable in size to a large country like Japan, creates the illusion of a nationwide utopia. The rest of the country tells a very different story, one of inequality that closely resembles the challenges faced by many developing economies. This brings us to an intriguing question: when American progressives advocate emulating China's model, what exactly do they envision? Funneling resources from across the U.S. to supercharge a few cities like San Francisco and New York, boosting their residents' incomes above $150,000, while the heartland averages $30,000? And using that low-paid workforce to build flashy subways and trains only in those major cities, just to flaunt online? It seems a very odd aspiration. Moreover, there's evidence that China actively promotes this narrative through funded influencers and media campaigns, amplifying successes while downplaying flaws. Interestingly, similar feats exist elsewhere without authoritarian oversight. Take Bangkok, Thailand, a capitalist city brimming with rooftop pools, skyscrapers, and monorails, all achieved without China's Communist Party. Yet, it rarely garners the same viral hype, perhaps because it doesn't fit certain ideological agendas. In the end, true progress isn't about copying one model wholesale, but learning from all, balancing innovation with equity, respecting history without being chained to it.